It has assisted in the caring of soldiers in 2 world wars. It has survived a Great Depression, a population boom, the Industrial Revolution, riots, flu epidemics, and everything else a century could deliver. It is a hospital, like the city it resides in, that changed our world. This is a story 100 years in the making. It's the story of some of the greatest doctors and nurses arriving from all over to start a world-class hospital in an industrialized city exploding in population. This is how medicine was transformed, thanks to a group of pioneers who wanted to create a healthcare environment never seen before, in a place no one would expect. Welcome to Henry Ford Hospital.
These are the minds of medicine. This is their story.
Hello, and welcome to a very special Minds of Medicine. I'm Paul W. Smith, standing inside the Henry Ford Health System exhibit at the Detroit Historical Museum. In many ways, Detroit and Henry Ford Hospital have shared histories. The ups and downs of the last century significantly shaped both the city and the organization. Both were also significantly impacted by the same American titan, Henry Ford. His assembly line brought masses of workers to the city. Although it would be transformative for the area, the city had too few resources to handle this population explosion. This included a serious shortage of health care, and that's where our story begins.
Well, as Detroit developed and around the auto industry, as it grew, and as the city leaders decided one of the things that we ought to have is a major league hospital. The city didn't have a centralized public hospital. So they got together a group of city leaders with the intent of building what they were calling at the time Detroit General Hospital. The Detroit General Hospital was going to be the community hospital. Henry Ford was on the finance committee, didn't chair the committee, he was on the finance committee. And as things began developing, the design took shape, the construction began, Ford had some issues with the way things were proceeding, and he started withholding his funding. And of course that brought the whole thing to a halt. And so, because it came to a halt, they came to Ford and said, look, would you consider taking it over? And after considerable deliberation, he said, all right, I'll take it over if I can do it my way. They said, fine.
Let's go back to the beginning, early 1900s, when this hospital falls into Henry Ford's lap. So as this new hospital was being formulated, everything from the medical staff model, which is now the Henry Ford Medical Group, was quite innovative. It was actually disruptive. He was a manufacturer. He was innovating on a daily basis on how to build the next best car. He actually incorporated the Ford Motor Company experimental engineers in the design of the facility, which was extraordinary for the day. He wanted it to be the best in the land, perhaps the world. The hospital beds that we now utilize today that allow the head or the foot to come up, those were designed by Ford Motor Company engineers, and that's specifically for Henry Ford Hospital, now commercialized worldwide. This was the early 1900s that this was done. So this place has in its DNA innovation, and you can feel it.
And so, in a city overwhelmed with people, a hospital run by Henry Ford and his first administrator, Ernest Leibold, needed to find experts. They found some of the brightest minds in medicine, starting with Frank Sladen, who studied under one of the most renowned physicians in history, Sir William Osler. Henry Ford Hospital hired other specialists from across the country to work in an environment that had been only tried in a few places in the United States.
Henry Ford's fundamental philosophy was to get the best doctors he could, give them the best technology they could, and let them run with that. This is how he got Frank Sladen to be the first chairman of medicine, Roy McClure to be the first chairman of surgery. And he wanted everyone to work together. He wanted it to go to the patients. And this was far-sighted. This was at a time when 99% of doctors were mom and pop shops. They were individualists and they just practiced by themselves. They didn't communicate, they didn't team together. But Henry Ford forced that upon the medical world in Detroit by the sheer force of his personality.
When this hospital was built, he had no idea what to do in a hospital. He had no idea what went in a hospital, to tell you the truth. He wanted this hotel for sick people, but he also wanted a hospital for every man. And that was part of it. So as he was developing this middle class through the pay that he gave to the workers at Ford Motor Company, including one of my grandfathers, that became the opportunity for them to have the dollars and the discretionary dollars in order to choose that. That was revolutionary at that time.
Almost immediately, this innovative culture began to pay dividends. Henry Ford Hospital became the epicenter of new discovery, from the invention of the Barron food pump to the creation and use of a heart-lung machine. Physicians and researchers began to see this new community hospital as a center of excellence.
We're very proud of our heritage. Dr. Sladen was one of the last residents trained by Sir William Osler, who is considered the father of modern medicine. Dr. McClure was trained by Sir William Halsted, who was considered one of the fathers of modern surgery. Both of them were at Hopkins at the time, which was the epicenter of the new medical education, started at the later part of the 19th century. So we're very cognizant of our heritage. We were one of the early group practice models in the country, along with the Mayo Clinic and several others, but we were clearly outliers. Most people were still in private practice at the time. I think in the first 20 years, we grew to over 100 residents and a similar number of faculty. And when you start out with one faculty, Dr. Sladen, that's pretty impressive growth over that period of time. We were building departments. The departments were building educational programs, and it was a very exciting time to be here.
From 1915 through the 1950s, Henry Ford became a worldwide name in medicine. The hospital hosted national conferences, and new discoveries propelled patient care forward. When we come back, how this innovative culture came to be. We'll also see how civil unrest during the 1960s unraveled the city all around the hospital.
You could see the buildings burning, and you could hear the sirens going, and then they brought in the troops.
In the decades that followed its opening, Henry Ford Hospital grew in size and in reputation. By attracting some of the finest healthcare minds into its radical medical group model, the hospital became an important environment for discovery. Researchers arrived from around the world, creating new opportunities for collaboration. The healthcare model was changing, and Henry Ford was right at the center of it.
And of course, as the hospital grew, it became this centerpiece for education and innovation and care delivery. And I think that largely has remained unchanged even into today. And of course, lots of things around medicine have changed over time. We've done a lot of tremendous things in the medical group, new procedures, new approaches to disease. But what I think has not changed has been the commitment of physicians to great outcomes for their patients. And I think that's what makes this place really special.
Along with this dedication to patients, it was a pioneering spirit that led Henry Ford Hospital to offer patients many firsts. They were one of the first to offer clinical trials for penicillin. Conrad Lamb, a surgeon and innovator, became the first in the country to administer heparin, a blood clot preventing drug that revolutionized medicine. Dr. Fred Whitehouse was one of the first to administer human insulin for diabetics. Nearly every department in the hospital was challenging and improving medicine. Henry Ford also became one of the country's largest non-university-based research centers, helping to create new treatments for brain tumors, stroke, and many others.
It's always been the intent of Henry Ford that seeking out new knowledge, that innovation was a part of what we do. It's a part of our motto of the Henry Ford Medical Group. And the reason being is that we know that there's always something beyond what our practice today has to offer each patient. Many patients have come to us because their diseases are incurable or untreatable or are rare and unusual. And they want us not only to research what the next step is, but also to try to understand what is going on with them today.
I think what's wonderful about working in a hospital is that it's patient-centered. You could end up in doing research in a university and you're really remote from the disease, from the impact on patients. Being right next door, just a corridor away from the clinic, has a tremendous impact and a motivating impact on doing research. And a lot of the work that we've done over the years has been translated to the clinic.
Because of this focus on a translational approach to research, scientists working directly with doctors ensured the patients at Henry Ford benefited from new discoveries first. By the early 1960s, Henry Ford Hospital was on the international stage. Suddenly, this hospital wasn't just for Ford's working class. But as the organization changed, so did the city around it. Racial tensions threatened to break Detroit and this hospital apart. And for 1 week in 1967, Henry Ford Hospital was at the epicenter of these tensions.
I think Henry Ford Hospital, like many institutions in the 60s, struggled with the country struggled with the race relationship. The riots took place because of many different conflicts that occurred throughout the country. And in the immediate community, we had neighborhoods where when African American families would move in, their houses would be trashed, windows would be broken, spray painted, and all sorts of things. And that's not too far from Henry Ford. So there was a great deal of conflict that was taking place throughout the country there.
At that time, 12th Street, which is only about 2-3 streets over from here, and that's where most of the fires were. And that's where I think that's where I'm sure that's where the riots began, on 12th Street. And you could see the buildings burning, and you could hear the sirens going, and then they brought in the troops. That's when it really got scary, because I could see the National Guard come right. They came right by my house. That was very, very, very scary.
It really was. There were flames all over the place, and actually, as it turns out, the Ford Hospital, unlike the other big urban hospital, was right in the middle of it.
Every room was filled. I know we slept in one room because we were in the belly of the beast, if you want to put it that way. And so we were always, they bought everybody. They bought the policemen, the firemen, the community people. All of them came to Henry Ford.
The riots did have a significant impact on Detroit and the hospital. The population began to retreat to the suburbs, and many of the city's hospitals did the same.
The hospital was most affected in its training programs. It was a disaster for the training programs because the spouses of potential house officers said, no way, it's not going to be Detroit. That picture on the cover of Time magazine with the flames was nationally published, and people just decided against that.
So what we inherited there in terms of the demographics was a highly polarized metropolitan area, southeast Michigan, if you will, and probably the most polarized metropolitan area in the country in terms of the city and the suburbs. And of course, we were in the city where many of the doctors and many of the hospitals had already bailed out, and that posed some very significant problems.
The pressure on the leadership of Henry Ford Hospital to keep it afloat could have tempted them to leave the city as well. But thanks to some innovative leaders, a new, more diverse workforce would lead the way to change.
When I was there, I was first person of color in the medical records department, but there were others who were on the floor as receptionists, elevator operators, orderlies, etc., just not doctors. But things began to change.
When I first came here, the physicians in Detroit actually met and said to me, I said, no one's ever been there before, Rick, and they gave me all this advice, and they told me don't mess up and all these sort of things, and so they were supportive, but also charged me with not to mess up because it hadn't happened here much at Ford.
The biggest thing that's happened since World War II, I think, has been the diversity within medicine. We've come a long way in my lifetime, and rightly so.
Creating a more diverse workforce was critical to the hospital's healing and growth. But that wasn't Henry Ford's only challenge. Even attracting nursing and physician talent to work downtown proved difficult.
There were really two schools of thought that evolved. One was what I call the center of excellence theory, and that is traditional kind of thinking in medical centers. That is, if you build enough excellence, people will come. And the other school of thought in that respect was, unless we can bring our health services to where the people are, they're getting what they need in the suburbs. So we sort of developed a duality of strategy. Go into the suburbs with ambulatory care, plus building the excellence on the main campus. And there was never any discussion about abandoning Detroit.
To stay competitive in this ever-changing city, Henry Ford's executive director, the late Stan Nelson, offered a visionary approach, creating some of the nation's first satellite medical centers, beginning in Troy, and then Dearborn and West Bloomfield. Henry Ford also acquired its own insurance company, Health Alliance Plan, to better integrate healthcare and insurance for patients. Through it all, Henry Ford stayed true to its vision for the community.
It's a pillar of the city. It holds it together. It's a glue. It's part of the glue that holds the city together, I believe. It goes back to my great-grandfather, and I believe that he had a vision that being the automobile capital of the world, Henry Ford Hospital, or his vision of Henry Ford Hospital, had to be in the city of Detroit.
The organization, when it was founded by Henry Ford, he said he wanted to build a hospital for every man. And it's turned out to be just that, taking care of the richest and the poorest people in the city. And so from the founding, the hospital has been an important asset to the city and the region.
If you grow up in healthcare, you grow up in, I mean, the operative word there is care, right? And so you grow up with the thought that you should care for people. And our presence here in the community, our continued presence in the community, really exemplifies that. The fact that this community was not abandoned, that we have figured out how to deliver extremely high quality health care to the community in a very challenging environment. A lot of other systems have failed where we have succeeded. One of the reasons I stay is it makes me proud that we were committed to the city and committed to the idea of health care for a population, and didn't, quite frankly, take the easy way out.
When we return, the discoveries that will shape the next 100 years of medicine, found right here in Detroit. After 100 years of care, researchers and doctors are now looking at the next century of discoveries. Thanks to an environment that explores these new possibilities and a medical group that collaborates to find new treatments for patients, this future looks limitless.
Innovation is how you energize it, and you bring new ideas, which bring new revenues, so, new ways. It also excites people, charges them up about doing something. Otherwise, it becomes every day doing the same thing. So satellites were innovation, HMO was innovation, home healthcare was innovation. You know, doing all these is exciting. Everybody takes pride in doing something else.
With a long-standing commitment to research and education, Henry Ford now employs over 200 specialists and scientists working on several hundred different research studies. They have received recent international acclaim for innovative treatments for heart disease, stroke, and cancer. It is this commitment to excellence and innovation that has earned them the triple crown of National Quality Awards, including the Malcolm Baldrige Award, one of the nation's most prestigious performance excellence awards.
When you see the head of Health and Human Services here in this very Innovation Institute not that long ago, coming in, trying to learn best practices from us because we're defining some of those best practices. And that I think that's how we retain and enhance our reputation back to where Henry Ford would smile.
At many academic institutions, it's the department and you have to go up the silo and down the silo before you get to talk to anyone else, or if you have an idea. And here it was so nice that I could walk 20 feet to go talk to the primary care physician that was taking care of the patient. I could go talk to general surgery, I could go talk to vascular, I could go up and talk to urology, and it didn't seem like it had the same constraints that a lot of other organizations did.
I think we continue to drive the way that we provide care to patients and what's the best way so that we have good clinical outcomes. That's what changes healthcare. I mean, that's what changes the care that is provided.
Today, Henry Ford Health System has 5 hospitals, dozens of medical centers, and over 1,200 physicians. With over 3 million patient visits every year, this icon of healthcare now looks to transform the community once again with a new cancer center and broader development of over 300 acres near West Grand Boulevard.
Henry Ford has been very integral in helping revitalize the city of Detroit, not just where they are, but its foundation have invested in a lot of community projects. And the kind of commitment that they've made most recently to look at the development around the hospital itself is enormous. They don't go out and beat their chests about what they're doing and how important they are to the community. But without them, I think the revival would really probably flounder.
There's something special about knowing that you're part of an institution that has been here now for 100 years, and that you are a link in a chain that is building on what's come before you, and just the incredible pioneering spirit by which this place started in 1915. But that energy and that spirit is still here, and you can see it moving forward for the next 100+ years.
I think the next chapter is our vision. It's transforming lives and communities. It's contributing to a new age of healthcare that focuses much more on all of us taking care of ourselves better, improving the way we manage our health, and having much better outcomes, eliminating racial disparities, making Detroit the kind of city that we know it can be, and being part of that transformation process. I think that's the next chapter.
The one thing that we cannot lose at Ford, and I don't think we've lost at Ford, is the curiosity to always ask the question, what could it be and how better can it become? And that is a driver for everybody, whether it's the senator, staff people who deal with making our hospital better looking, to our nurses, to our clinicians, to our assistants, to our leaders. And I think this is now what I see is very exciting at Ford. There's an enthusiasm and an excitement that is very contagious of what could it be for the next 100 years.
A woman was driving down with her daughter, coming down the western part of West Grand Boulevard, on an extraordinarily rainy, kind of foggy night and was experiencing chest pain and was becoming increasingly frantic over that. And it's difficult, you can't see anything, and it was a very difficult situation for them. But she said that the moment that she saw the sign in our clinic building that was lit up that said Henry Ford Hospital, that was a beacon. And that's how I view it. I mean, we are a beacon. We are a beacon of good things. When others have left this community, we are here in this community. When others felt that you couldn't get a referral base coming to this institution except in very small components of what we do, we've challenged that and overcome that. We're a beacon of doing the right things, we're a beacon of health and wellness, we're a beacon of extraordinary medical care, and we're a beacon of economic recovery. And that's, I think, what Henry Ford Hospital has and will continue to represent in the future.
100 years, a great start. To watch more Minds of Medicine, go to henryford.com/MOM. You can also schedule an appointment. Thanks for watching.